So I've started with the chain 18. So working on the back bumps of our chain, we want to start with that very first back bump, which can sometimes be a little bit tight due to our working loop as well. So we pick up 1 and 2 loops. So you'll have 3 loops on your hook. You yarn over and pull through 2 right away. This is a very important step. Do not do the pull through 1, pull through 2 right away, and then take those stitches off. Then for row 2, we will pick up 3 stitches. So the first one is in this first vertical bar, or that first stitch, or the TSS. The second one is in the same chain where we picked up our last stitch from the previous row to pick up our loop, and then the next loop we pick up will be in the next back bump of that next chain. So I've picked up 3 loops, so you'll have 4 loops on your hook. Make the return pass. Remember to pull through 2 for that first set. So now for row 3, we'll be picking up 4 loops. So my first 2 are a TSS. My next one is a purl stitch. So I bring the yarn to the front, but I pick up in that same chain as our last stitch of the previous row, and then pick up a loop in the next chain. 5 loops on the hook, return pass, pulling through 2 right away, and finish that row. Row 4, we'll be picking up 5 loops. My first 2 are TSS, and then I have 2 purl stitches. So remembering always the second last loop is in the previous row, the same chain, and ending with the next chain to pick up our last stitch. So we should have 6 loops on our hook this round, or row. Return pass, pulling through 2 at the beginning. And ready for row 5, so we'll pick up 6 loops. 1, 2, I need to do a purl and a knit. So if you can't remember which it is, where you go down to the previous row chain, it's where you would usually make a border stitch. Instead of working into the border stitch, we work down into the previous chain. So mine is, my last one is always a purl stitch for this particular border, and then pick up a loop in the next stitch. I'm on row 5, so I should have 7 loops on my hook. Pull through 2. Row 6, we'll be picking up 7 loops. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and 7 in that next chain of our foundation chain. So I'm on row 6. I should have 8 loops on my hook. 2, 4, 6, 8. And then work that return pass, always pulling through 2. So I will let you continue to work your opening rows, working down each row, adding another pickup on the chain, working all the way down to our last stitch. So I'll meet you on my last row of the border and help you see how to make the connection and to start the pattern on the side. So we want to make the connection to our very first stitch on the bottom edge. So I can see my first stitch, that little V here, and I want to connect to that loop in the back behind that to begin the first connection to the blanket. So then we just work our regular return pass. So if you had cables in that last row, we don't for mine. It'll just be a straight return pass. You would need to be mindful of if you have the cables and need to add any chains in between stitches as well. Okay, so I'm just going to lay this out for you so you can see how this border is going to work now. So we have our edge of our blanket, the side edge here. We're going to be working across the bottom of the blanket. Okay, and each of these next rows then will connect to the next stitch on the blanket. And you can see how we've made this nice angled on the corner. And once we've worked all the way around, we will be joining to complete the mitered corner with our rows from this side. Okay, so I will help you with that as well. So I have worked my repeats, or I've worked the last row of a repeat here and the last 2 rows leading to that corner stitch again, so that I can show you how to work the second, what will be the second, the third, and the fourth corners for this border. So now what we're going to be doing is starting to decrease on our border edge. So we won't be connecting, and we will be eliminating 1 stitch each row. So you're still going to follow along the row for your chart with the stitches that are there. So my first row starts with 2 TSS and a purl stitch, followed by 12 knit. 1 and 2, 3 and 4, 11 and 12 knit stitches. Then I have a purl and 2 TSS. This last TSS becomes my new border stitch. I do not need to make a connection this row. Then for the return pass, we will start by pulling through 2 right away, and then on further rows we will not be working this border stitch, so that's how we're going to be decreasing. So pull through 2 right away and finish return pass. And then I'll show you the next row as well. So on my chart, this is row 25 I'm working, but depending on your border, it may be a different row. So 2 TSS and a purl stitch, 2 knit, followed by 2 purl and 2 knit, work my cable, 2 knit, 2 purl, work my next cable, 2 knit, a purl. So when we get to the last stitch of the row, we are decreasing. We're working a TSS, but instead of just working in that last loop, we want to pick up the top loop of that border stitch as well and work through both of those, the 2 together stitch, to make a clean edge on our decrease edge. And then we'll just work our regular return pass for that row. So you can continue to follow your chart until you get to the very edge of the corner, and you've decreased all of those stitches, and I'll meet you at that point. So I'm ready for my last few rows of decrease on this border. Here, I'll move this so you can see that a bit better. So I've worked my row 38. So you can see I have 3 more rows left for this first part of the corner. So I need to make a TSS in 2, pick up my border stitch. So there's 4 loops on my hook, pull those off, TSS in the first one, and then that border stitch or that 2 together, pull that off, and then work a 2 together stitch at the end and pull through both loops. Then we're going to continue the second half of the corner. So we want to pick up the vertical loop of the previous row. So back for row 1, we pick up the next border loop and the next one down for 3 loops on our hook and do the return pass. The second row, you pick up that first loop, then a loop in the same border stitch as the last one of the previous row, and then pick up 1 more row down. 4 loops on hook, return pass. So 2 loops here. My next stitch is a purl, but I work it in that same border stitch as our last loop of the previous row, and then work down to the border stitch 1 more row down and return pass. So I'll do 1 more row with you. Pick up the loops as you see them, the 3 loops. Mine needed to be a purl there. And then you pick up in the same stitch as the last one of the previous row, and then the next border edge you pick up a loop. So my white might be a little bit tricky to see, but if I bring it up this way, you can see how the lines of these rows are just carried across around the corner nice and neatly. And that's the result you want to be as we're working these corners. So you can continue to work down the side of the corner, adding an extra loop each time and each row, following your chart, and I will meet you as we get close to the blanket again to start working down the side of the blanket. A couple things as you are working to help it easier. I find it very helpful to have a stitch marker in the end of my first row of the second half of the corner. In case I lose my place, I know which row I'm on. I have worked most of or all of the corner. I've come back down our connection rows in the pattern of the chart to work it across the corner. So hopefully that went smoothly for you. So on my chart, I am now working row 18 and I'm ready for my first connection row. Now this will be, we finished up on the bottom of the block. We now want to start the first row on the first or that bottom row of the side to make our connection for the corner and work the return pass. Okay, so you will have had more rows obviously across the bottom than I have here. You will have your border down here across the bottom. We have worked our mitered corner to turn around the corner, and now we've started connecting to the sides of a row. So I've worked my last final 3 rows across the last part of the blanket, the last side, and we're ready to join to our starting corner. So on the first row of decrease on your chart, you can pick up all your stitches across. I have my last one here to pick up, so I'll pick up a loop as normal in our last stitch. And then we also want to connect to the first row of that first half of the corner to pull up a loop, and then we're going to pull that same loop through the first 2 stitches on the corner that we're working to make our decrease on that side and to connect at the same time. So then you'll work your regular return pass. So you can go ahead and do that. And then on the next row, you can go ahead and pick up your first several stitches until the last stitch, and I'll meet you there again to show you that connection one more time. So I'm on my second row here, and we have the 2 loops of the 2 together left on the row. We go under both loops of that 2 together stitch to pick up our last stitch or our last loop, and then we join, make the connection to the first half of the corner and pull that connection loop through those first 2 stitches for our decrease on this row. So you can go ahead and work your return pass and then pick up your stitches in the next row, and we'll work row 3 together as well. So I've reached the end of my 3rd row. I just need to pick up that border stitch, so we insert under the 2 together stitches to pull up our loop, and then the next row up on the first half we make our connection, pull the loop through and through those first 2 loops to make the decrease, and then we can start to work our return pass. So you can continue to work in your pattern all the rows and making those connections as I showed you, and I will meet you close to the top, close to the end of this joining corner. So I'm ready for my last few rows of this connecting corner. On my chart it's rows 38 through to 41. So I'll work my first few stitches. I have 2 TSS and a purl, and then I'm ready to pick up that 2 together stitch for my last loop, and then make the connection to the first half and pull that loop through the first 2, and then work the return pass, and then TSS in 2, pick up in the 2 together stitch. It is helpful as you work those 2 together to be careful not to make it too tight on those loops as you pick them up. Pull that loop through 2 on the connection, return pass, pull up the first loop and the 2 together stitch. Oops. Pull up a loop, make the next connection, pull through 2, finish off. Then we want to pick up that last 2 together stitch for our loop, make our connection, make that connection loop, and pull through both loops on the hook, and then we'll just make a slip stitch in the top corner there to finish off. So then you can see, if I hold up my corner here, you can see how we've made this joining edge or mitered these final 2 half corners together.